So we have four amazing speakers today from Microsoft, and even our very own Fatima Karni, who will be moderating our panel later today. We've had over 100 RSVPs. People are a little slow in joining, but we're sure we're going to get there. And yeah, I'm just going to go into a little bit of the agenda real quick. Yes, so we're going to start off with our organization's introduction. Then we're going to go into a panel introduction that the panelists will be doing themselves. And then an amazing panel that we're so excited to hear about that will be moderated by Fatima. And then I'll be doing the Q&A and closing remarks. And we plan for all this to be about an hour long. And now, who are we? It's many of your first times here. There's a lot of returning people here today. But we are Muslim women in technology. Our mission is to empower Muslim women and other underrepresented groups through a few different things. We do it by one, networking with our over 550 members. We do it with recruitment. We have pipelines and hiring processes that we've set up with many companies, and we're building on expanding. So if you're someone who's part of a company that wants to hire from our community, reach out. We do have a lot of mentorship. We have individuals ranging from high school students who are part of our community all the way to the C-suite. And lastly, we provide access to educational and career development workshops. So some of our things that we're really proud of from this past year is we've done a few tech talks on various topics, ranging from, we had a panel with data scientists, we've had a panel of UI UX designers, we've had a panel of product management folk, and these are all women in these positions that are thriving in their roles and sharing their expertise with our community. And then in addition to that, like we have today, we have this Tech At series that we do. So we've had this Tech At series with Facebook, we've had it with Twitter, we've had it with Google, and finally today we're doing it with Microsoft. And then in addition to that, we have a really big focus on intersectionality. And this past year, we have partners with organizations such as Latinas in Tech, Anita B, General Assembly, and we hope to expand that even more. So again, if you are part of a nonprofit or a company that is interested in partnering with us, definitely reach out to us. Stay connected with this link below. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have an amazing Slack community where you can talk about things ranging from career questions to a job board tab. So definitely be sure to join that. Go to that link below. And last but definitely not least, our team is growing and we are recruiting. So if you're interested in volunteering your time, that again, at that link, you can find applications for joining our board. Next slide. So who are the people behind this event? We have Safa Shamim, our co-founder, and she works as a consultant in product management at Slalom. And then, hello, there's me, Sarah Uther. I'm the co-founder of Muslim Women in Technology, and I work as an application developer for CNA. We are a commercial insurance company. And then the person who many of you may already know, Fatima Karni, the Director of Technology Operations here at MWT, and she works as a software engineer at Microsoft. And then people who RSVP'd, you got emails from Harim Khalik, who is our Director of Communications and who also works as a tax consultant at PwC. And if you want your face up here, apply and join our board. And we're so excited to hopefully expand furthermore. And yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Fatima to get started on our panel.
Yeah, hey, assalamualaikum everyone. I'm so excited that you're all here, and I'm even more excited to introduce our four amazing panelists. We are just gonna get right into it and have you guys introduce yourselves. So tell us, who are you? What do you do at Microsoft? Also include, what is your favorite animal? Because we were just chatting about animals. This is very important. So Azima, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I'm Azima. I'm a UX designer at Microsoft. So I've been there for 5 years now, but I didn't start in UX. I started in data science. So kind of a little bit of a weird way of getting here. But and my favorite animal is a cat. Like we mentioned, we were talking about earlier. I really like a cat, but my mom thinks that she's allergic to it. So TBD on that.
Okay. Thank you, Fatima.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. I work on creating features for our mobile development organization called Intune. Let's see, favorite animal, I would have to say probably a bunny. I don't know. I've always just been so fascinated. They're so cute. They don't get as much love as kittens and cats. So justice for bunnies. Yeah.
I love bunnies. They're so cute. Alina?
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Alina. I'm a writer and content PM at Microsoft, which basically entails creating blogs and videos about the experts who build, deploy, and maintain Microsoft technology. So I kind of get to be a storyteller for a living, which is really fun. And my favorite animal is probably a dolphin. I was definitely a dolphin girl growing up. And one time my dad drove me from Seattle to Vancouver just to see their dolphin exhibit. And it was the best day of my life, honestly.
That sounds amazing. Also, dolphins are so cool. This is great. We're talking about all the animals. Anyway, and last but not least, Madiha.
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Madiha, and I'm an engagement lead here at Microsoft. I work specifically within the marketplace onboarding and enablement team. And in plain English, what that pretty much means is that we help partners kind of create a presence on our marketplace, which is a B2B kind of e-commerce platform. In terms of favorite animal, gosh, this is a really, really tough one. The panelists know that I already have cats, but kind of cats, dogs, bunnies, dolphins, they're all in there somewhere. If I had to choose one, I would probably say just like the lions and lionesses. I mean, they're just majestic. So, yeah, maybe a spirit animal or wish to be my spirit animal.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to also share my favorite animal because I'm up here, so why not? Which is jellyfish. They're great. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing now real quick now that we've got an intro of our lovely panelists. And we're going to jump into our next question, which is, we've heard about what your role is and what that means briefly, but can you tell us a little bit more about what does like a day in your life look like? And we can go backwards this time. So we could start with Madiha.
Oh, great. Well, I guess the publishers or partners that I work with are globally based. And now that I'm in Seattle, which is one of the last places in the world that kind of wakes up, my day does tend to start a little bit early, certainly if I'm working with partners that are kind of based in other countries. So typically I'll start about 7:30, 8-ish. And from then until early afternoon, I'm just involved in meetings. Hopefully the majority of them should be external, but some of them do end up being internal as well. And then my late afternoon, when everybody else is kind of logging off in the world, is kind of my catch up time. So where I just go through emails and whatnot. So yeah, so kind of an 8 to 6, 8 to 7 day is probably my normal day.
Cool. Alina, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think my role is broken up into a few different parts, but it's all the end-to-end content creation pipeline. So part of my day is like fielding pitches and having meetings with subject matter experts to see what stories we can tell. And thankfully we have really strong relationships with people we've interviewed in the past. So usually they'll come back and say, hey, I have a new idea or initiative. Can we meet and talk about what it would be like to talk about it externally? And then the brunt of my work is actually making content, which is really my favorite part. So it's interviewing subject matter experts, it's coaching on-camera talent for videos. My coworker and I, there's two of us who run our entire video program end to end, and usually production teams do this, so we have a lot on our plate. And I think the most fun part is when we can go into our studio in the office every few weeks, and either I'm in the control room or in front of the camera and vice versa, and we get to actually function like journalists. So it's a lot of fun.
That's super cool. Fatma?
Yeah, so I think I would kind of classify the work that I do in two parts. Number one, when I'm just working normally, and then number two, when I'm on call, because that has like its whole routine in and of itself. But usually what I'll do is, I'll wake up, I'll get into my meetings. This might be like a one-on-one with my manager, just, talking about like, oh, this is what I did over the weekend, questions about maybe things that I'm blocked on. And then a good course of the day is spent meeting with some PMs, because the PMs will tell us, hey, we want to have X, Y, and Z feature. Is it possible? And then it's going back in, trying to see what resources we have available. Is it possible to build out? And so since I also do full stack development, so both front end and back end, I'll first look into the back end part, see if we can design something that's, scalable and we can build, and then go into the front end work and then also try to build that out. Send out lots of code reviews to my peers to review, and then look into maybe open bugs that people haven't looked into, and then call it a day. If it's on call, it's literally at any point, any hour of the day. I don't know what I could be doing. I could just be running around, but yeah.
That's cool. And Azima.
Yeah, so I'm a designer on Azure IoT. I don't know if I mentioned the IoT part earlier, but I work in a very technical space. So a lot of it is very like technical enterprise related work. But it's really fascinating to kind of just figure out like everyone's learning together because it's a very new space. But so a lot of my work is not hardware or like sensor related, but we work on a lot of data and visual design on how people would interact with data that comes from sensors. And so it's a really fascinating space. I've been in the space for 2 years, but day to day, really, I really work closely with engineers and PMs. And so as a designer, you kind of are part of this like triad of part of this product group. So you kind of sit between PMs, research, and engineering. And so what I spend most of my time is maybe like meeting with the engineers and the engineering team to figure out what we want to build and how we're building it, and then PMs to work with kind of like the strategy and figuring out like, more of the details, how we talk to customers, how we engage with them, and then research with like kind of figuring out like what should we actually build and who's saying things about what we already built and how do we kind of improve on our product already. And then I kind of go back down and like design ideas and explorations and things that we could kind of visualize how people interact with our product. So it's kind of like a really interesting multidisciplinary job sometimes, because you sit in meetings with people who have very different scopes and very different priorities, and then they have fun at kind of like the ideation exploration with design and kind of figuring out like what we could do in the product space that we're in. But it's been really fun. Like I think the most fun part of the job is kind of talking to customers and figuring out like how do you figure out what they want out of what you're making and what they want to see next and what they like or hate about what they already have in the product that you're working on, competitors that are doing something similar in the space and how they interact with them. It's just really fun to kind of see like how your product's being used in the wild and how people are interacting with it. So I think it's a really fun job to kind of it's kind of like a mix of art and technology, but at the same time, like very real in like how people use things.
Yeah. I think it's like so cool how we all five of us, we all work at Microsoft, but all of our roles are so vastly different. And this kind of leads into my next question, which is Microsoft has so many different services, so many different products, so many different teams, so many different roles, right? And like the opportunities here are endless. How did you decide that you wanted to work in the role that you're working in now? How did you make that decision? Whoever wants to go first can take that. Fatima?
Yeah, I was trying to like think about my answer. It's interesting actually. So to be quite candid, I didn't always maybe know that I wanted to do specifically software engineering. I think I was always drawn to product management just because I felt it was a lot more interdisciplinary. And I think just being able to work with people from like various different backgrounds, and maybe it's my own like misconceptions that I came in saying like, okay, I want to be in a role where I can talk to a lot of people. And I just don't think software engineering is that. And I think it wasn't until I actually explored it a little bit and, gave it a try. And again, roles from different companies vary. The role that I was at my previous company, I definitely felt like, okay, I'm not like talking to a lot of people and I just don't see myself doing this in the long run. But when I was looking for different opportunities and I was looking specifically into Microsoft, something that I really thought was kind of cool was their like angle in terms of like accessibility. I thought that was something that not a lot of companies were doing just, quite heavily and having a lot of different efforts to make sure that that's included in almost every aspect of the product. So I was like, you know what, let me try applying, let's see what happens. And I think to my own surprise, I was really shocked to see the culture. It was very different than what I was used to. I really enjoyed, the people that I was talking to, the people that I currently do work with. And I think that kind of solidified my choice of like, okay, maybe this is somewhere where I want to be. But yeah, to be quite frank, it's not necessarily the first thing that I had in mind, but it's interesting to see how things played out. And I'm kind of happy with where I am currently.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I know it's a lot of stress for a lot of people to like figure out what is the right thing for me to do. And I think Medea also has a lot to say about this, right? So if you want to go next.
Yeah, so certainly, I mean, I was thinking about that question, and just so many thoughts pop into my mind as to why I went for the role that I'm in now. Long story short, I mean, I was with Microsoft UK and I'd been there for a couple of years, and I was looking for my next steps. And, kind of I had come from a completely different industry in terms of being in finance, for, for the early part of my career. And in that world, I had worked with a number of banks, but I had always got a little bit frustrated about working for these multinational companies, but not really being able to explore other opportunities within those companies, right? You couldn't even really talk about looking for other opportunities. And it was a real breath of fresh air when I joined Microsoft to just, see how much it is encouraged here to really understand more about the company, and to explore other opportunities, ones that you may never have even considered previously yourself. And so when I was in the UK and I was thinking about, okay, my next steps, I knew I wanted to stay with the company. I also knew I wanted international exposure. And so I thought, well, why not the mothership in Redmond? And plus, to be fair, it had coming to the US was one of the better quarantine rules as far as my pets were concerned. So that kind of helped too. But I think for this specific role, what drew me to it was the fact that it allowed me to do one thing which I really, really love, which is working with, external parties and companies, because there's just such a wide variety of personalities and motivations. I know Fatma was kind of talking about this earlier as well. And so kind of no meeting is the same, which is something that I really wanted. And then the second aspect of it was that it actually took advantage of my finance background. So in my current role, the industry that kind of I'm the lead on is, funnily enough, the financial services industry. So it was kind of a really nice fit in that it took notice of the background that I had, and it was also building upon those skills, which I already have in terms of kind of working and influencing, I guess, other third-party companies, not companies that we can turn around and say Microsoft expects you to do this, but rather, kind of how can we work with you to really understand what your ambitions are, and make sure that, kind of you do go ahead and achieve more, certainly in your partnership with us.
Yeah, awesome. I think your trajectory here, your transition here was like really cool, and that's like one of the reasons we wanted Nidhi to come here and speak, because I know there's a lot of people that they start at certain roles and they're like, oh, maybe something else is for me, and then
yeah, certainly this was not a space that I thought I would end up in at all, especially given that I don't have a technical background. But now that I am here, kind of it's the longest that I've worked with any company, and that's saying something very positive about where it is that I'm working.
Yeah. How many years have you been at Microsoft?
In total, coming up to, oh God, you're asking me a good question. 6 years. It'll be 6 years next month.
Awesome.
But the fact that it doesn't feel like it is a good sign.
Awesome. Congratulations. Alina or Azima, do you want to give anything to add here about we were talking about, oh my gosh, what were we talking about?
Yeah, like transitioning from like a different career or something. Yeah, I really like what you said actually, Madhiya, because that's actually like similar to what happened to me too. Like I was a data science intern at Johnson & Johnson right after undergrad, and I kind of didn't even know UX was like a career, a thing that you can focus in on or like actually like have a job in or anything. I was just like interested in like art and technology, but I was like, I guess data science is like kind of in that direction because you could visualize interesting storytelling, kind of like what Alina hinted at earlier, like trying to figure out like storytelling through data and information and things like that. That was interesting to me. And then when I was at that internship, I like found a stretch project in UX, and I was like, oh, what do you get to do? Like I met somebody at a one-on-one, and they were like, because they encouraged us like, oh, meet people around the company, like you can meet like new people and like discover new things. And so I did that, and I met somebody who was in UX, and they were like, like, oh yeah, like, you know, come like hang out with us, like look at what we're doing. It might be interesting to you. And then I ended up staying for a full year, staying like as an intern working in UX only. And so like I kind of sort of fell into it from the beginning, but I did start in data science. And then when I came to Microsoft, they offered me a rotational program, and they were like, oh, we know you have like a really strong data science background, and that's what we want to offer you as like a full-time job, but we know you have other interests. So if you want to rotate around the company and try new things, you can do that for 2 years before you find a place you want to stay at. And so for me, that was like winning the lottery. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, I don't have to like commit to anything right away. Like I can try data science for 8 months. And then, so it was like a two-year program. And they were like, do I stay as long as you want in any rotation? And so I did like 8 months in data science, and I moved to 8 months in UX research, and then 8 months in UX design. And then I ended up staying in design, and then switching to the current role that I have. And it's funny because like what you said, Medea, earlier about like them using your finance background, because the same thing happened to me where like they offered me this role because they saw that I have a really strong data science background. And they were like, oh, our product that we want you to design for is a data platform. And because you have a strong data science background, like we know that you understand the users really well. And so I got to work on like, you know, Power BI and things like that in the past as well at Microsoft. But like this team kind of gave me the like kind of like insights driven design work that I really wanted to be part of. And so like now I get to work with customers who like I understand them a little bit better, because I was like, oh, I was you at one point, and like I had the same kind of concerns and problems about visualizing information and trying to look at like how to clean data and kind of like do all that data science things, but also in like a very like interactive way, or something like more visually appealing. So that was really interesting that you mentioned the same thing, because my like kind of career trajectory was a little bit of the same.
And quick question, where did you find this rotational program? Like, how did you find out about it? Sorry if I missed that part.
Oh yeah, so like I actually applied through my university, and it was like a one position. So I actually applied for PM, but then they were like, oh, you have a data science background, like why don't you do service engineering, which is like similar to data science, and it kind of became a data science role. But I found out about the role after I applied for that role, and I was like, oh man, like I should have applied for the rotational program, because I found out about it later. But it was funny because I was gonna bring it up to like the recruiting team, but then they were like, oh, actually, like when you come to the full-time, like the final round interview, when I went there, they were like, actually, we're actually hiring you for that role. Like you actually didn't have to apply to that thing, because we're actually going to move you into that rotational program. So I kind of like didn't apply directly to it. They kind of were like, oh, I think you'd be a good fit for that one. So they just like kind of moved me over. And it kind of like stemmed out of that. So it wasn't really like anything on my part, but it was really interesting because I found it on their website later on. But they had it available at the time, and it was a good opportunity at the time.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. I think rotational programs are like a really great way for a lot of people to figure out what it is that they want to do. So that kind of goes into our next question. Well, sort of. Fatima mentioned previously about culture at Microsoft, and Alina, let's have you talk about this question. What is the culture like at Microsoft, and do you feel like it's been, if you've worked on different teams at Microsoft, do you feel like it's been different? How do you feel?
Yeah, I think this goes for any company. So there is kind of this like workplace culture at large, but then every team is kind of like its own mini company in the way that it functions. So the first time I came to Microsoft, I was in experience and devices, so in a product group. And just like to be transparent, I found that there was a lot more funding and resources there. Like I could go to my manager and say like, oh, I'm working on these UX writing strings. Can we do a research study? And then they would find the funding to run that study and give me the insights the next week. Whereas if I was trying to do that now on a much smaller team, I would think I would probably have to figure out how to do that myself. But I will say, like, on the whole, I think growth mindset isn't just a buzzword. I do think it's kind of a lived out value. Even when I think about my work, I was hired initially just to be a writer. But I told my manager, I really want to pursue video. I want to build my personal brand. I want to be on camera. And he was like, okay, 30% of your role can be dedicated to video. And it was really that simple. And the fact that I think the culture was this thing about not just being a know-it-all culture, but a learn-it-all culture, and that I was invited to learn this new form factor is really representative of the company. So I think there's a reason that I've stayed so long. And I think it will be hard to leave one day because they do treat us really well, but I'm sure people have had a range of experiences depending on where you are.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like really cool how Microsoft is like letting you like, design your own role, right? And yeah, I really appreciate that. And Fatima, maybe you can pitch in on this part. Do you feel like the culture is somewhere where you feel like supported? Do you, all of us are like minorities at Microsoft, right? And some of us in more ways than the others, right? Do you feel that you get the resources you need to be you?
Yeah. Definitely. So to be transparent, I joined Microsoft a little over a year ago. So right at the start of the pandemic, I had my suitcases ready to go. I was like, let's move to Seattle. And then they were like, JK, everything's on lockdown. So I haven't had like an in-person experience at Microsoft. So everything has been completely virtual. And I have not met anyone on my team in person just yet. But I think speaking to just the way that, everyone was just very quick to adjust to this whole, new virtual normal. I think my experience so far has definitely like surpassed what I was expecting. So I know right when I had joined, a few months afterwards, there was just a lot of, racial tensions in the country. And a lot of times it's really hard to kind of go to work and just sort of separate yourself from that. A lot of times you carry that into the workplace. And something that I really appreciated was not just even my team, but just my org as a whole, took note of that and were very transparent about that. There were members of my team that were like, hey, do you want the team to do any kind of learning? Do you have any materials you'd like to share for us to do? There was even a town hall with my larger organization where they had people, talk about their experiences being Black in America. And this was something that was very shocking to me, I think, just because in my previous experiences, I never felt this sort of like level of transparency with people, not just on my level, but like executives and everything, just kind of being very transparent about what's going on. And I think that just set the tone for me, at least very early on, of the way that Microsoft sort of deals with things. It's not just a, nice poster that says, oh, like we care, or, oh, we're really accepting, but there's action to follow up with that. And I thought that was something that's really cool. And that's definitely stuck with me since joining. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really great thing about Microsoft. So I'm going to transition into a little bit more role-specific questions. And one question for Madiha is, so do you have any like advice you can give for people who want to be in more like senior leadership roles?
Gosh, at Microsoft or generally speaking?
Generally, or at Microsoft, however you want to take it.
I mean, I guess I would say, it's interesting, right? I find Microsoft as a company which you can pretty much architect your career in whichever way you want to, right? But you do have to put in the effort to kind of achieve those results. And that in itself, for me, because I guess I do have a few comparison points with other industries and with other companies, is something that I really value, because they do give you that space and that kind of, that growth mindset approach, as was mentioned earlier, to say, hey, okay, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to get to? And as long as you know where it is that you want to be going and you're willing to work for it, we'll support you in that journey. And, kind of in terms of a senior leadership role, it really depends on what a person would be looking for in that, because you can have senior leadership roles where you are still very much an individual contributor, but you can also have senior leadership roles where you're managing, teams of people, right? Even as an individual contributor, you can be having a lot of influence over other teams, and maybe in a little way it's a little bit harder to provide that leadership, because you kind of can't default to the lazy, well, I'm your manager and I'm telling you to do it, right? So you kind of have to find ways to really kind of I guess get teams and people to collaborate and work with you. And so I guess my one piece of advice, if I had to summarize it in a nutshell, or at least one that I rely on pretty much in every aspect of my life, not just with the career, is, I read a motto somewhere, or a quote somewhere, where it says, we will not starve from the lack of wonders, but lack of wonder. And I really believe in that, because if I'm not feeling in that state of wonder, whether it's in my career or whether it's anything else, then I kind of know it's time for me to be looking for alternatives. And that could well also be about, kind of my career ambitions. So I guess, kind of the key thing is to remain hungry, but not just for the material or financial gains, or the status, but, hungry in terms of you're actually almost, not in awe, but you're genuinely interested in the subject matter that you're in, and you genuinely want to do a good job. And part of that is you will be recognized for it. But the other part of it, which I would certainly say to women and minorities in particular, is make it super clear what it is that you want to achieve. Don't sit there silently and expect people to be able to read your mind. I think I certainly suffered from that in the past. And now, I'm very, very clear around, hey, this is where I want to be in the next 6 months or next year or whatever the story may be. And I do lean on my management to support me in understanding those goals, not in that they will make sure they do all the work to get me there. 80-90% of that work will still very much be me, but I need them to be there to support me for when there are opportunities. Then they're encouraging me to kind of, go ahead and grab them.
That was great advice. I took notes to remember that for later. Thank you for that, Madiha. Alina, I have a question for you next. This kind of ties into what we talked about in the beginning, and we didn't get to ask you about that, so I'll ask you about it now, which is, so we talked about how there's a lot of different roles at Microsoft, and how there's a lot of people who want to work at a big tech company but don't want to, be a software engineer, right? And so I thought I'd ask you about this because you're a writer and a content PM, and that's a unique role that not a lot of people know about. Why did you decide to pursue this role at Microsoft, for example, instead of somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most candid answer is that it was kind of an accident, but I do feel like, so I guess like to give you a backstory, I remember when I was in like my third year of college, I was still a biochem and public health double major. So I was like I had taken all the OChem. I hate OChem. Okay, but I had done it because I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. And then I was like, I don't really want this. Like, I don't actually enjoy this work. And if this is my life, I want to enjoy what I do every day. But I had discovered journalism in college. And so I remember logging on the Microsoft website, and the one position they had open was a UX writer intern. And I was like, this is me, right? It was like a job about storytelling, like you advocate people in their needs, you listen to them without assuming. And I was like, is this actually a job that I'm qualified for that's like relevant? And I applied, and I have no idea how. Like, I didn't have a referral, I didn't know anybody, but 3 months later they called me and they were like, hey, we really like your resume. Do you want to come in for an interview? And I interviewed on a Thursday, and then Friday morning they told me I got it. And like, it was actually that simple for me. And I'm really lucky that every role I've had at Microsoft has been a writer or a content creator, whether it was technical or not. So I think it's a good reminder that even if like, writing, marketing roles, design roles, they exist at tech companies. Of course, software engineering is a core part of it. Microsoft is an engineering company, but you can't create full-fledged products and services without all these other functionality areas. And I'm really lucky that I get to be in the storytelling part of it because that's what I want to do for a living. So I would just say, like, even what I've done is like, if there's something I really like I'm looking into marketing now, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll search like marketing or content strategy Microsoft, and I'll find people who are doing jobs that really interest me, or find job descriptions that sound like my dream role, and then meet with those people. And oftentimes the barrier to entry is just knowing somebody or knowing what the work you're interested in is called. But you can do pretty much anything in tech. I think you just have to know how to find it.
That's awesome. I'm really glad that you found a role that works for you at Microsoft. I have a question for Azima, and that is, so a lot of people, when applying to Microsoft, they're very like scared. They're like, oh, it's a big tech company. How can you overcome like that pressure, imposter syndrome, and just apply for Microsoft? Any advice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like a lot of people have this question about like just applying in tech in general, because it seems so competitive and so like overwhelming to like to students who are trying to compete for the same roles. I think like, I mean, this is a very cheesy answer, but I think like a lot of times like people often try to figure out like what the company or what the interviewer is trying to hire for, and they try to fit themselves into that mold of like, oh, well, like people that I've seen, or I mean, representation matters, we know that, but trying to figure out like what other people have gotten into this company have, and they try to kind of emulate that even if it's not them. And so I've seen that a lot where people try to like in portfolios and things like that too, with design interviews and things that I've done, like when we're hiring for design and just in general, like people try to figure out like, okay, what are the things I need to tick off the little grid, and like try to figure out like how I can mold myself into somebody that would be hireable. But I think a lot of times people forget that like people are looking at like why they should hire that specific individual. And so trying to figure out like what you bring value to this role and to this industry, like what unique things that you have that people might not be able to offer the same way, and trying to figure out like what your authentic background is. But in a lot of ways, like I feel like people like kind of overlook that sometimes, where it's like, oh, people don't want to know about my hobbies or my side things. I'm just going to talk about like what I know technically and try to get this job. And in design and in other, and I think PM and engineering even, like I think a lot of times like it's kind of like, okay, what did you do that's like unique in your background, or like your identity, but your background in work and school and like everything else too, like your life. Like I always give like advice to people, like if you're a photographer, put your photos on your portfolio site, or put like other things on your site that make you more of a human and a personable person to talk to. Like the airline test really matters. Like if it's like people want to be stuck in an airport with you, like are you interesting to talk to? What makes you interesting in that way? And trying to showcase all that will definitely land you the job that you want, and not the one that you think you should have.
I've never heard of the airport test before. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, people always said like if you're like trapped in an airport because you have a delayed flight or something with your coworker, like who do you want to hire that you would want to talk to in that awkward situation? And so like that's kind of like what people think about when they're interviewing people, like, okay, how do I like make sure that this person is like personable and like fits the culture and has something to offer other than like doing the job, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So we only have a couple minutes before we need to transition into audience Q&A. So I have a couple more questions. Next question is for Fatima. And, and that question is, what advice would you give to women who are entering the tech field, maybe as like, early in career, coming to a tech job for the first time, students, whatever? Is there anything that you wish you would have known?
Yeah. I think something that I had to learn quite early on, like in school, and specifically, taking classes and oftentimes being the only person that looks like you in the room, is everyone kind of, or people will oftentimes put up a front of like knowing a lot more than they actually do. And I don't know if this is just like a defense mechanism or whatever the case is, but a lot of times, would lead you to kind of like doubt yourself or feel maybe I'm not qualified, maybe I don't know. And something that I wish I had really internalized is that, don't doubt yourself. And a lot of times, what you know or what you think you might know, just try it out. The worst that's going to happen is you got it wrong, you failed, you try again. But those little failures that you have along the way shouldn't necessarily hinder you from feeling like you can accomplish something. And then after I graduated and when I was preparing for interviews and things like that, is obviously like, it's not going to be super easy to just, snag a job right when you graduate, but just to be really persistent in the process. I know specifically with software engineering and software engineering interviews, the process, I'm sure Fatima, is super tedious. You have to make sure you really know your material like inside and out. But again, just because the process seems very like long, tedious, really hard, keep going. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing yourself work hard, and then maybe there's something that you really wanted, and like hopefully you're able to get that, and just feeling like that work pays off. So yeah, just don't feel discouraged. A lot of times people that you feel like, oh, they know a lot more than me, I'm not qualified because I don't know as much as X, Y, and Z. We're all kind of figuring it out. So I think that's something that I would definitely tell my younger self, or anyone that's just starting to pursue this field.
May I just add to that a quick comment, right? I mean, I totally agree with you, Fatima, in terms of, kind of don't be disheartened if it's taking you a little bit longer than you'd hope to get to where you want to. I know when I first applied to Microsoft, I actually got rejected for that role. I went through the interview process, and in the end they said no. And to be fair, it was completely the right decision because that wasn't quite the role for me. But that didn't stop me from applying again, right? So and then the second time I did get the role, and it was a role that was definitely the right fit for me. So I think it is very much a two-way street. I think sometimes when you're interviewing, you can forget that whilst you really want to impress the company should be impressing you as well, right? And so kind of if I think back to my first like rounds of interview at Microsoft, whilst the company was impressing me, the role wasn't the right role. And I knew that in my heart of hearts, but I was, you know, still kind of, I was definitely distraught when I didn't get it. But the second time, I think, was where everything was just kind of clicking in. And I would certainly say to my younger self and to anybody that is willing to listen, you know, make sure the company is the right company for you as well. You know, don't always think it's a one-sided conversation where you have to impress that company. They should absolutely be working to impress you as well and to have you as part of their team.
Thank you for that. Yeah, this is all really great advice. And it's very important to have, you know, look at both the company and yourself when you're looking for a new role.
Yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way, so for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the audience Q&A, both from the pre-submitted questions, and if the audience wants to ask any questions now, we'll go with those. I'm going to add Sarah back on here to lead the Q&A, but I also have one last question, both for the audience and for Sarah representing MWT. And that question is from the audience: what is the most helpful way to be an ally to the Muslim community and to support you and all the communities that all of you are a part of? And anyone can take this.
I can get started on this one. I think there's a lot of talk about the idea of mentorship versus sponsorship. And I think one of the big things that allies can do is not only be just a mentor, but sponsor for your Muslim colleagues, your women colleagues, like whatever those minorities are in this space. So that means when there's talk in a room about who should be up for a promotion, who should be appointed to some cool project, when they're not around, make sure you're saying their name and you're elevating them. I think that's a really important way that you can be a really great ally to the community. As someone who's on board for Muslim Women in Technology, I would say help us out. We have an amazing group of women, Muslim women, other marginalized groups who attend our events, who are looking for jobs, and they have exceptional skills. So try to branch out and recruit from organizations like ours. And I'm going to let the panel cover the rest of it.
Yeah, I think my thoughts on this are that allyship is an action verb, and also it's not always easy. So I think about this in terms of intersections. Like for me, I'm a queer Muslim as well. So if somebody makes an assumption about who I'm dating, right, I would want my coworkers to stand up for me and correct them. Or like in this past year with Black Lives Matter, like resurging as a movement, it's our responsibility for those of us who are Asian to be in solidarity with the Black community and stand up for them and not put the pressure on those communities to educate everybody else, right? It's our job to educate ourselves and to teach others. I think this is something I've really learned at Microsoft, being the youngest on my team, and basically my whole team is white, that a lot of them weren't having these conversations about allyship, and this year has really invited me to be an active ally, even when it's not easy, because I know that others have done that for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to build on that if we have a moment. You know, kind of, I totally agree with you, Lena, that I think a big part of being an ally is really trying to understand who it is, or which group or minority or whatever it may be that, you know, it is that you're trying to be an ally of, right? You know, kind of almost by definition, we are all individuals and we all kind of have different quirks and whatnot. And as we start getting bucketed into various groups, whether it's as women or as Muslims or as, you know, whatever the label may be, you know, kind of there will be some inherent, you know, kind of, I guess, differences from what you would typically describe as an average, you know, kind of white heterosexual male, right? Which is kind of like the bar that everybody is saying, oh, okay, in comparison to this, where are you fitting? So I think just having those open conversations to try and understand how you can be a better ally, having that growth mindset, understanding where you may have your own unconscious biases as well, and then, you know, working to address them, I think is all a step in the right direction. And I don't think any person or company has really managed to crack the nut on this yet to perfection. We're all a work in progress. But I think just turning up with that intention to do something and actually putting the action behind it is, is incredibly useful and helpful.
All right. I think that definitely gave me some great perspective too on how to approach it as someone who wants to be an ally to other minorities in this space. I'm going to transition into this next question, which I think either Fatima or Azima, you guys can answer. What can someone do to make themselves a more viable candidate at Microsoft and stand out from the crowd? Do you have any tips for people who want to apply, particularly entry-level positions? Do people need internships, side projects, referrals, etc.? What would your recommendations be? Azima, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, okay, I can start myself. Yeah, so there's a lot to that question. But I think like the point that about like referrals versus and like side projects and things like that, like what makes you stand out more. I think like what I mentioned earlier too, like just trying to figure out like what makes you unique and how can you bring that to the role. If you make a strong case for yourself of like Alina mentioned earlier, I think like she kind of paved her own path there. And like I think if she made a strong case for herself in like her personal branding and like wanting to go into the video space too, like trying to figure out like ways that make you unique and your interests that make you unique, and like trying to figure out like how you can pave your own path in that way. But even if it's like a predefined role that you're trying to get and trying to figure out how you can become a PM at Microsoft in general, things like that, like try to figure out what you bring that's new or more relevant or like maybe like more marginalized that might not be as represented at the company, and try to figure out like how you can kind of like add value in some way, and that makes a strong case for you. But then I think for the referrals part, I think referrals definitely do really help. Like I think like referrals for the most part, I think for industry hires especially, like that really helps, like trying to get somebody that you know. Like I think Alina also mentioned this earlier, like if you know somebody, like I think that's kind of like you're into the space and understanding what the company is looking for even. But I think also for like referrals for like undergrad, like for like new grads and interns and stuff, like doesn't really work as well. Like I think there's like just so many people applying at the same time that like referrals for those kind of positions kind of get like kind of put to the side in full transparency. Like I think it's more industry hires that get more visibility for referrals. But I think in that same case, like try to figure out like how you can leverage your schools and things like that to kind of get like the in from your schools and recruiting there. And then side projects definitely help, especially if you're applying for design or even like engineering projects. Like some of the people that I've been mentoring, like trying to figure out like how you can, what kind of projects you show and like how to find resources on like what is good storytelling. And even for engineering projects, like how to show things that you've worked on in the past, like that definitely helps, especially if it's outside of your work. And if you haven't interned at many places and you're trying to get an internship, like showing those kind of things is super helpful. Yeah, I don't know if that answered all the parts of the question. But Fatma, you can take it.
Yeah, you literally hit the nail on like everything. There's one thing that I also wanted to mention. If you are applying to a company, say Microsoft, for example, taking maybe a product that they already have and building on that and adding that to your resume, I think shows, number one, a lot of initiative. And then number two, passion about this company specifically. The example that I like to give a lot of people is, say you're applying to, I don't know, Spotify, for example, right? And you listen to music every day. This is something that you, usually use, but it's like, oh, I really enjoyed it, but I wish they had maybe like a journaling aspect where you can like add some notes per songs. This could be like a cool project that you add and you showcase on your resume, because I think side projects carry a lot more weight than people, tend to think, because a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I don't have a lot of internships. I didn't have a lot of time during my classes. Side projects are the best way to be able to do that. So really try to maximize, I think, on that front would be really helpful.
That's awesome. And also I think Spotify has like an API too you can work with. So that's pretty cool. My next question is, it's also one of the Q&As from the pre-submitted questions. And it is, first of all, what is the best part of your job? And what is the work-life balance like at Microsoft? And how can you make sure to maintain this balance? Alina, you want to get us started with that one?
Yeah, was the first part the most fun part of our jobs?
Just whatever, the best part, most fun, however you want to go with it.
Okay. Oh, okay. You guys, I feel like I'm having so much fun, honestly. Like to be able to like tell stories for a living and interview people, considering when I was in college, I would get paid like $15 to $30 max per story, which was like 5 to 10 hours of reporting. Those are the writing samples that got me this job. But now to be like paid to tell stories, to be on camera, which is something that I've always wanted, like that's the dream, right? To literally, like, I pitched this role and I got converted full time. So this is exactly what I wanted. But I think in terms of work-life balance, I really appreciate that my manager in the company values the things I do, not just for my immediate team. So even in my recent performance evaluation, I told my manager about all the speaking I was doing. And he was like, you should absolutely be putting that in your performance evaluations, and you should be telling our senior leaders about it. And if you want to go to a conference or you want more mentorship, we have funding to support you. And I don't think a lot of companies would always value that because it's not necessarily a part of my role, but he knows that it's something I want. And so I think in terms of balance, I'm not good at this, but I think it's important to set boundaries of like when you're working and when you are not working, which is hard because I live here and like this is also my office. So even like I know people have been putting things in their emails to say like you will receive this message during a time that's convenient for me, so feel free to answer when it's convenient for you. Or knowing like when you'll be available and when you won't is something I'm still learning how to do, but I will say on the whole, Microsoft is really receptive to that. We don't have to be working 80-hour weeks just to exist. And if you are, you can always talk to your manager about scoping it down.
Yeah, that actually leads us into one of the other questions we have, which is um, being Muslim, being a woman, and then some of you have more intersections to your identities. How do you find support at work? Whoever wants to take that first, go ahead. Even Fatima, you work there now too. Garni. For example, I can like talk about something with my experience. Like for example, like I think mental health is another thing that isn't talked about too much. So some places of work will offer things like meditation rooms, but since we're remote, there are a lot of people or a lot of companies are offering subscriptions to things like Calm and apps like that that kind of help people with their mental health. But yeah, how do you guys feel supported at work? I'm gonna give it to Fatima or Azima. You unmuted, so go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can go. Yeah, I think one of the coolest things I think about Microsoft and like many companies like this is like they really offer support in like terms of culture in your team, but also like you outside of work. And so I think like one of my favorite perks that like of working here and in the tech industry is that they really support your outside of work like fitness health and things like that. So we get like a budget basically like in our team for morale events, but then we also get our own personal budget. Like every year they give us money to either buy fitness equipment or like mental health included. And like so like you get the Calm app is also covered in that, like Headspace I think it is. But then you also get like fitness equipment, and like now this year they also had added hobby support. So like you can like basically expense like so much money into like your own hobbies. And so like I really like gardening and like just like woodworking and like just all these like DIY things that I've gotten into in the last year in quarantine. Like now that it's part of it, like I think they recognize that, and they were like, a lot of people are now not in the office, they don't get the comfort and support of like being in near people all the time. And so what are they doing in isolation, and how can we support that? And so I was like super excited about when I was like, oh, this is so cool that like they also offer support for hobbies. And now I'm expensing like ceramic stuff and like all these like really random things that like your company should not be paying for, but like they are because it's like covered as your hobby. And I'm like, yes, I'll be expensing like wood from Home Depot, and it's like, yes, this is my hobby, so I'm going to be like, you know, making a desk or whatever. And so I think it's a really fun part because it makes you feel like they value you outside of work as well, and not only like you kind of meeting deadlines at work, and that's just like your only purpose at work. So it feels like they're more holistic in like how they're supporting you outside as well.
And I can add two additional kind of comments, I guess, to that, right? I totally agree with Zima in that here, they're certainly at Microsoft, and I think this is actually true of a lot of kind of, you know, companies in tech in particular, but also outside of it, that, you know, kind of they really do encourage you to be your authentic self, whatever that may be, right? There's a lot of training at Microsoft which tries to bring to the surface how people have, you know, covered in the past, and so pretended to perhaps be something that they're maybe not, or to fit into what is, you know, thought to be a typical ideal, right? And there's a number of training videos internally which actually involve our senior leadership talking about how they've covered in the past, right? And the whole aim behind it is to make us feel more comfortable being our authentic selves, and to create an environment where we can be our true selves. I think somewhat related to that actually is also just the the intensity in a good way that Microsoft has on diversity and inclusion, right? And again, we're not perfect at all, but I think Microsoft takes diversity and inclusion probably most seriously out of all of the companies I've worked with. And kind of those companies are pretty good as well in this space. But I think Microsoft really understands that in order for it to live its mission statement of empowering every person to achieve more, they kind of have to be, we have to, as a community, accept each of our individualities and whatnot. And also, as part of that, Microsoft recognizes its influence over other companies. I know when I was in finance used to look very seriously at what tech companies like Microsoft were doing in D&I. And then use that as an example for something that they could emulate. So, kind of, I think that those aspects really help you kind of be your true self, whether it's you being a Muslim woman or, kind of having other intersectionalities as it may be. But again, it is a work in progress, but I still think, kind of we're heading in the right direction.
One thing I just wanted to add as well that you slightly touched upon, I think with intersectional identities, Microsoft, I think other companies do it as well, but they have ERGs, which stands for Employee Resource Groups. I think Microsoft has 9, but I know I'm a part of one of them called BAM, Blacks at Microsoft. And so they have their own set of, activities, things that'll support its members. And then you can also get involved, host things. So I think it also allows you to be a lot more than just what you typically do from your 9 to 5, but also what would you normally be doing, like, I don't know, if you had free time, stuff that you're passionate about, things that you like to do. So yeah, I think the employee resource groups are also pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just one quick comment on that actually is I loved your point, Fatma, about actually contributing actively yourself as well, right? Kind of to these ERGs or contributing to, the diversity and inclusion kind of motion, whichever company you're at. And if that company isn't supporting you or encouraging you in that, then, kind of it might be time to consider working somewhere else.
Yeah. Speaking of it, I feel like that's some great advice. And speaking of advice, just to end off our Q&A, I guess, can you guys provide the best professional advice you've received and any last words to our community here today? We have people ranging from allies, women, men, Muslims, non-Muslims, just people interested in the tech space. So yeah, if we can start with, we can do Madiha, Alina, Fatima, and then Azima.
Oh, wow. Best career advice. I think I'm still looking for that. So, no, I think I would say genuinely, I think, and we were touching on this earlier in some of the, kind of earlier discussions, really being your true self and allowing what kind of makes you tick and what is close to your heart and your passion really come through, right? Because you can't fake that stuff. There was a question around imposter syndrome and whatnot, and as an FYI, we all suffer from that, right? Not just women, but men, everybody. But kind of, it's just how you manage to cover it. But I think if there's really a passion for something that you're doing, then that just comes through regardless, and it's always appreciated. And then, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Just like final like statements, because we'll be wrapping up our event.
Oh, well, just gratitude. Thank you for listening to me ramble on a little bit. As was kind of mentioned, I've certainly not had a traditional linear path to where I am today. And if there's one thing that I would say is kind of almost take that as a good sign that you can go off and do different things and still end up in a space that you never thought you'd end up in, and genuinely really enjoy and love it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think my advice or words of encouragement is that it only takes one yes. And sometimes that yes can change your life. So I work with a lot of mentees and folks who like, they really want to be at Microsoft, for example, but they've been rejected over and over. And I know that's really hard, right? Like we're all here, but maybe you're aspiring to be at Microsoft or whatever your dream company is, and that opportunity hasn't come. But know that sometimes these things just take time. Like even for me, my dream role is to be a creative director at Spotify, and I'm not at Spotify, but I'm always doing the next best thing to get closer to my goals. And I think sort of like a more tangible piece of advice is like, if you feel like you're getting those no's, I recommend focusing on building your brand. So what are you known for? Like for me, my brand, I work at Microsoft, but that's not my brand. My brand is being a storyteller, it's being a mentor, it's being a speaker. So focus on telling your story on whatever platform makes sense, and you will start to get the attention of these companies. Like even when I started focusing on my brand, companies that rejected me left, right, and center are now emailing me to say, hey, we want to hire you. And now I feel like I'm in a position of power to say, now I can choose what yes is right for me. So really focus on growing for yourself, and then the companies that you aspire to be will start to see you.
Oh, Fatima, I think you're muted.
Oh, oops, I do this all the time. Sorry. I love that. Absolutely love that. And I think kind of, piggybacking off of what you're saying, everyone's timeline is going to look different. It's so easy to be like, okay, what was my graduating class? Where is everyone at? And like, where do I kind of place into that in terms of that? Everyone's timeline, everyone's goals, it's going to look different. And so if you don't see yourself, kind of looking like that trajectory as, your peers, it's totally fine. And something that someone recently said to me, when I was kind of, just trying to understand like, oh, like what do my next steps look like and everything is, don't be afraid to reach out. Like it might seem like it's super weird or like really awkward, but a lot of times if maybe you see someone and that's kind of where you want to be, even shooting them like a LinkedIn message or just, reaching out, just saying, hi, I'm so-and-so, wanted to introduce myself. I see that you're doing X, Y, and Z, and I would love to learn more. Do a coffee chat, something casual, but just put yourself out there. Like the worst that's going to happen is they're going to ignore your message or just be like, sorry, I don't have a lot of times. But most times people are more than happy to sit down, reach out, talk to you. So I think, and once you reach out, you might even explore other professions that you never even knew about. Like you didn't know that a role like that existed. So yeah, just reach out, put yourself out there. I think that's the best thing that you can do in terms of propelling your goals.
Yeah, I think for me, like I think my previous manager actually told me recently, or like when I first joined his team a few years ago, that like I think one main thing that he's learned also, and like that was really relevant for me because I like to do a little bit of everything and try to squeeze in time for everything and like try to make sure that like I do all the things that I'm interested in, but that becomes overwhelming sometimes. And so one thing that he told me was like you have to remember to like under promise and over deliver, and I think that was like that kind of stuck with me over some time because not only is that relevant for your professional life and like at work, like making sure that you are like, like you're not kind of falling behind on deadlines or things like that, and like not over promising and like making sure that you can actually do the things you promise. By the way, you said the same thing, me too. And so funny because like that's also true for like my personal life too, because sometimes I'm just like, oh yeah, like I want to do this, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and like I'll just sign up for everything, and like everyone in my life is usually like, okay, like pick 2 things and do them really well instead of like trying to overwhelm yourself with like doing everything at once. And I feel like my personality is very much like I'm just gonna do everything, and like I can totally do it, like it's fine, like I'll make it work. And sometimes it's not true. Like you need to also think about your mental health and like making sure you're not always getting overwhelmed and like keeping time for like real downtime, because I know like a lot of us like to like fill our downtime with like other hobbies and like other things that are like very like like productive hobbies or whatever, but sometimes it's really important to kind of build that balance into your own life so that other people respect that as well. Yeah, I think that's like my advice and learnings, and I'm still learning that.
Azima, I think that was like directed. I felt your advice directed at me. I was like, yes, I need to work on that. But yeah, thank you all for those final pieces of advice. Harim, do you mind posting in the chat everyone's LinkedIn profiles? And then also audience members that have joined today, feel free to post your LinkedIn profiles in the chat so we can all get connected. And of course, if you join our Slack community, it's much easier to stay connected with everyone. And yeah, I'd like to thank everyone, including our very own Fatima, who's also a part of Microsoft, for spending their Saturday with us. I know you guys all could have been in so many different places, but I know for sure I learned so much today, and I'm going to be reflecting more on the things I heard from you. And thank you all. Thank you to the amazing audience for your great questions, for leading this discussion. And I hope we see you at our next events. Assalamu alaikum, and have a great Saturday.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Like,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy your weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
your weekend.
All right. I'm going to leave the chat open for a few minutes if anyone wants to find the LinkedIn's.
Yeah.
And yeah, if anyone has anything else to put in the chat or needs anything from us, we'll stick around for a couple minutes. But other than that, you can drop. Thank you all.
I actually have just a small question.
Yes.
So, like, where is it possible to get tutoring or something like that from like this organization? Because like I started like doing like programming classes, and I started realizing like, I don't know, for me, like it takes like a lot of time to like understand it, and it's like I need like advice because like I want to continue doing what I want to do, but the problem is like I don't know like the path. I talked to like counseling and all that stuff. They tell me just like take less programming classes, like, you know, if I need to like spend that much time, and you know.
Yeah, Wasim, we can actually talk online about this if you'd like. Feel free to like, you can message me on Slack or LinkedIn or something. But I think a great idea you can do with this community is if you want people within the org who are applying maybe to jobs, you guys can, like a helpful thing to do is form like study groups. So you can go through like cracking the coding interview questions, just make it into bite-sized pieces so it's a little easier to get through. You're probably familiar with like Leet Code. I think that's like a great way to get started. You can start on like the easy part and then work your way up so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. But yeah, there's definitely plenty of resources, and I'm sure there's other people who are also in the same boat as you who would be more than happy to work with you and form like a study group maybe.
And it's on you said on Slack, or I should message, or should I just?
Yeah, you can post it in Slack. You can like message me if you want, or if you want to direct it at a specific person. Also, if you just want to post in our general group and ask if anyone is interested in like a study buddy or like wants to form a study group or whatever it is, I'm sure some people might be in the same boat.
We have the invite to our Slack is in our solo link, which was posted earlier in the chat.
Here, let me just post it again.
I just posted in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Irene. All right. If we don't have any other questions, I think we can end it then. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Salam.
Welcome.
Bye.
3, 2,